Kiddushin daf tezayin. How's everybody doing? Sugya full of limudim and drushes to figure out why is it that a Jewish servant, slave, is nicknamed bekesef, b'shtar, etc., etc. And then we're going to have a very interesting kavachomer that Rish Lakish says, and the Gemara is going to shlug him up. An Eved Ivri is purchased with a shtar because the pasuk says v'macheres. That you have a Amma Ivriya, a girl who's a servant, a slave, and the master marries her, and then he marries another woman. The Torah warns us that the second woman, the first, should be equal. The Amma should be equal. Don't take away from her. So there's a hekesh. We say there's a comparison between a regular wife and an Amma. And just like a regular wife goes out b'shtar, so too, and nikna b'shtar, so too an Amma. According to Rav Huna, it's beautiful because Rav Huna holds that the master, the purchaser of the slave, writes the document. And that's similar to marriage, where the husband who's acquiring the woman, he writes the document. But according to Rav Chizda, who holds that the father writes the document, we have a problem. So therefore, he must learn out from a different pasuk, that a non-Jewish slave goes out, b'shen v'ayin, and the 24 Rosh Yevarim, the tips of the fingers and the toes, etc. So we make a diuk, we infer, a Jewish slave doesn't go out like a non-Jewish slave, but goes in like a non-Jewish slave, and therefore you see that just like a Eved Knani is b'shtar, so too a Jewish slave is b'shtar. But you cannot purchase a Jewish slave b'chazaka. What's chazaka in a slave? That you force him to do something for you. The Jewish slave goes out b'kesef. Why? Because we learn b'kesef k'nasai, goes out b'shava kesef, the word, something that has value, from the word yashiv. Girayin is you prorate the amount of time he works and you give back, that's v'hevda. And goes out b'shtar. He's no worse than an Eved Knani. But mechila, just to say, I'm moichel d'chayiv, that this Eved owes me, doesn't work. Why? And this is a phenomenal chiddush. And if you're watching this just for this chiddush, it's worth it. The Gemara tells us that the body of a Jewish slave is kanui. In other words, you own somewhat of his guf for melacha. But nevertheless, it's not just a regular worker, you own his guf. A Jewish Eved goes out b'shanim after 6 years, yovel, 50, in the 50th year. And an Amma Ivriya goes out with one more, she goes out with simanim. The Gemara tells us that simanim have a limit, a lower limit, not an upper limit. We don't know when she's going to have simanim, but we know that there's a lower limit. In other words, a girl under the age of 9, according to everybody, those simanim are shuma, just the mole. From 9 until 12, and the simanim are still there, then we have a machlekes. And after 13, in other words, 12 in a day, then it's a siman, even if the simanim fall off. And the Gemara says that according to Rish Lakish, he makes a phenomenal kavachomer. He says, yes, we have all these ways that a Jewish girl goes out if she's a Amma, but I have one more, he says. If the girl's father dies, she also goes out. He makes a kavachomer from simanim. And the Gemara tries over and over to knock him off. And finally, the Gemara brings it to Yufta. That what? The Gemara says that simanim are different. You can't make a kavachomer simanim to misas av, because when there's simanim, she becomes a different person. Shtana haguf. That's not the same person that the master purchased. And Taisus points out, but a father, no matter what, he's still a father. So even if her body changes, he's still her father. The gifts that Eved Ivri and Amma Ivri receive when they leave, the parting gifts, so for the Eved Ivri, the gifts go to himself. And the big chiddush is that if you hold typically like Reb Nosson, over here, we won't do a shibud de Reb Nosson. And that is, as you see in the chart, that if there's a malva and a loiva, the malva lends money to the loiva lends money to a third individual, so the malva could go directly to the third individual. In our case, if the slave owes money to someone, the master cannot give that someone the gifts. He has to give it directly to the slave. And the chiddush is, that's the chiddush over here. However, when it comes to Amma Ivriya, the girl that's a servant, her gifts go to her father. And when her father dies, then the gifts go to herself. Why? Because you don't inherit the schus of the daughter, it goes to herself. The same thing applies to a mitzvah. If she finds something, the only thing is that the mitzvah goes to the father, but the time that it took her to pick up the mitzvah, even if it's a fraction of a second, or whatever it took her to deal with this mitzvah, that you have to pay back to the master. Now, according to everybody, A slave that goes out after 6 years, you have to give him gifts. If he goes out with yovel, you have to give him gifts. If he goes out because the master died, you have to give gifts. And if she's a amavriya, if she goes out with simanim, gifts. The whole machlokes is, if a slave goes out, b'girayin kesef, if he prorates the amount of work that he did, if it's considered that you mishaleach him, or perhaps he caused his own freedom and therefore he doesn't get gifts. But according to everybody, if the slave ran away, he doesn't get gifts, even though, let's say the immediate day afterwards was yovel. Why? Because he doesn't have to make it up. But if he did make it up, then you do give him the gifts. Rabbi Isai, have a wonderful day.